Alright, today we're going to learn how to set up our Raspberry Pi. So we should have inserted our SD card, which encapsulates our micro SD into our computer. It'll be in your Finder, or if you have a Windows computer, it'll be in your folders. We're going to open up Google Chrome and start downloading our Raspberry Pi software. You can go to Raspberry Pi's website to download the latest software. I just Googled mine. And click the first link here. I have a Mac, so opening the Mac OS download. I wait for that to download and I open my imager, which will be written onto our micro SD card. Once I have my imager, I transfer it to my applications and I am downloading it to my computer. I can open up Raspberry Pi Imager and this window will pop up that will allow me to write my Raspberry Pi software onto my SD card. So choose system, we will use the recommended Raspberry Pi because we're operating and it's compatible with the Raspberry Pi 4. Choose your SD card. This will come up Apple SD card or something. I have my SD card already in my Raspberry Pi. Then we're going to write directly onto our SD card, which will then be inserted into our Raspberry Pi in the next step. This is our Raspberry Pi. So you can see it's a board with soldered materials on it, such as ports and chips. These are HDMI ports. The back has some soldered metal. Make sure we don't touch this on any metal surface, just to be safe. So as I said, we have HDMI ports and our power port over to the left here, USB ports, and our GPIO prongs on this side, which we'll talk about later. On the back here, we can see that there's a slot for a micro SD card, which will be written with our Raspberry Pi operating system. So we can take our micro SD card facing up, slide it into that slot, and push until it reaches the bottom. It will be poking over just a little bit, but we'll have room for that once we start building our case. This is our Raspberry Pi case. It has an acrylic bottom that's held together by these 4 screws, and they are attached by these plastic nuts. So we find it easier to build from the bottom up than from the top down. It's easier to put the screws on top afterwards. So we'll start building up. It comes with these little plastic casings, which can be popped on the bottom. So the first 2 will hold the Raspberry Pi. There's a small gap for where the SD card fits. So we'll lay those over the screws. As you can see, there's the spot where the SD card can be easily accessed. The second layer will just be a little bit smaller than the first, and then you'll see the Raspberry Pi fits in there very nicely. So we're going to fit our Raspberry Pi in. The space with the end will have our SD card poking out from the side. As I said, it'll fit nicely into this little groove here. So we're going to pop it in, make sure that it's kind of hugging the plastic, and it'll be flush with the side of the second layer of plastic. Our ports are all accessible. Here are HDMI ports, and our USB ports will be on the side. So we're going to put this little builder block on, and we'll build up from there, making sure that we're staying clear of our USB ports. As we keep building up, we're going to make sure we're steering clear of our ports. We have a couple layers to go. This little space here is for our GPIO ribbon, which we'll show in our next clip. Now we're going to attach our GPIO ribbon. This is our GPIO ribbon, which is attached to our T-cobbler, which is our extension board, which is firmly put into our breadboard. So the red is the T-cobbler, which is the extension board, and it's attached to our breadboard, which is the white. As you can see, the prongs are matched up with these ports here in our ribbon. So we're going to place them over the ports, make sure they're lined up, apply even pressure, and allow for the prongs to be settled nicely into that gray plastic piece, making sure that there's no prongs showing through the plastic. Once we have that done, we can make sure we put on our acrylic top. and screw these in with our little plastic nuts that came with our package. We're not going to apply these too tight, just a little tightening will be good, and I will chat about our GPIO ribbon in our next clip. This is our GPIO ribbon, extension, and breadboard. The red is what we call a T-cobbler, it's our extension, and the white is our breadboard. So this is basically just exactly what it sounds like, an extension of our abilities to have electricity and do coding. So this is attached to our Raspberry Pi. It has these holes in it where our male prongs can enter. So what the extension board does is it has these ports here along the side that are, or these prongs, sorry, that are into the ports of the breadboard. And what will happen is we can use this to maximize our electricity. So as you can see up here, we have our 3-volt power. So that is what we use for the most part when we're using electricity. What we can do is put our male-to-male cable, one end in the top row here. We can bring it down to our another row, say this row labeled 40, put it into the row as you can see, and then those other 4 ports will serve as electrical functions as well. So we can maximize all of our ports rather than just have one port per prong. We're now going to apply power and connect our Raspberry Pi. So first we always want to plug in our HDMI. So it comes with a micro or a mini HDMI, which is plugged into my monitor already. So that goes into one of the 2 mini HDMI ports on the side of the Raspberry Pi. I have a USB keyboard and mouse that will plug into one of the 2 of the 4 USB ports. We always want to do this before we apply power to our Raspberry Pi. Then we're going to take our power adapter, plug it in just here to the left of our HDMI ports, and then we will be all set to turn on our Raspberry Pi. So let's get started. We'll turn on our Raspberry Pi, we'll turn on our desktop and click this button on the power cord, and our Raspberry Pi should be booted up in no time. It'll give you a generic screen and you can open your preferences, internet, or any of the coding applications that are already loaded. We're going to use the VNC Connect application to use remote access on my MacBook. So I've downloaded the VNC Connect software. We're going to use that number there to connect. Open my VNC Connect on my MacBook, enter the IP address that was given by the VNC Connect on my Raspberry Pi, and hit enter. Should connect, ask for a password. The password is Pi generically. I made up my own, or the username, sorry, is Pi generically. I made up my own password. Press OK, and then we should be allowed into our Raspberry Pi via our MacBook, which is super handy for doing screen recordings and screenshots. So we can see we're going to open up the internet on my MacBook through our Raspberry Pi, and I'm able to open applications that way.
Audio Hub.